What if I were to tell you that an airplane once ran out of fuel at 41,000 feet? An almost unbelievable proposition, isn't it? Yet this is the startling reality of Air Canada Flight 143, a Boeing 767 that found itself in this exact predicament on a summer day, July 23, 1983 to be precise. The day began like any other for the 69 souls on board. Originating in Montreal, the flight was destined for Edmonton. The passengers, the crew, all were oblivious to the impending crisis that would soon turn their world upside down. This was not a routine flight, after all. It was to become a page in aviation history, a tale that would be retold for generations to come. What happened to this ill-fated flight? How did a modern jet airliner run out of fuel high above the clouds? And most importantly, how did it end? This, my friends, is the beginning of an extraordinary tale of survival and ingenuity. It all started with a simple yet catastrophic miscalculation. Picture this. It's the early 80s. Air Canada Flight 143 is preparing for takeoff. The ground crew bustling about, performing their routine checks with practiced precision. But today something goes terribly wrong. The culprit, a simple misunderstanding between two systems of measurement, the metric system and the imperial system. You see, the Boeing 767 was among the first of its kind, a modern marvel that called for modern methods, including using the metric system for its operations. However, the ground crew was more familiar with the imperial system, which had been the standard in aviation for years. This seemingly innocuous mix-up set the stage for a miscalculation of epic proportions. The ground crew needed to calculate the fuel load for the flight. Usually this is a routine task. But on that fateful day, the crew used the figure for pounds of fuel instead of kilograms. The result? The plane took off with less than half the necessary fuel for its journey. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this error, imagine you're setting off on a road trip. You've planned your route meticulously, checked your car, packed your bags, but when it comes to filling up your car, you put in only half the fuel necessary to reach your destination. Not an ideal situation, right? Now imagine that same scenario, but instead of a car, it's a plane. And instead of a road trip, it's a commercial flight with hundreds of passengers on board. This miscalculation was not apparent at first. The plane took off smoothly, the passengers settling in, oblivious to the predicament that was about to unfold. On the ground, no one was aware of the ticking time bomb that had just left the runway. The crew had no idea that they had set the stage for an event that would go down in aviation history as the Gimli glider. Unknowingly, Flight 143 took off, setting the stage for a mid-air crisis. At 41,000 feet, the unthinkable happened. In the seemingly serene skies, Air Canada Flight 143 ran out of fuel. This wasn't just a single engine failure. Both engines of the Boeing 767 had come to a grinding halt. Imagine the pilot's shock, their disbelief. This was a situation no flight simulation or training manual could prepare them for. The aircraft, once roaring with life, was now eerily silent. The plane's altitude was their only ally, their only resource. The cockpit was suddenly plunged into an ominous semi-darkness, the only illumination coming from a few essential instruments and warning lights. The aircraft had become, in essence, a glider, a 40-ton metal bird adrift in the sky. As the reality of the situation set in, the pilots sprung into action. Captain Robert Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintal knew they had to keep their wits about them. They had to maintain some semblance of control, some semblance of power. So they deployed the ram air turbine, a small wind-driven generator tucked away in the belly of the aircraft. It was a clever piece of engineering designed to supply just enough power to essential flight instruments and control systems in situations exactly like this. But let's not mistake this for a solution. The ram air turbine was a stopgap measure, a band-aid on a gaping wound. It couldn't restore the engines, it couldn't refuel the plane. It was there to buy them time, to give them a fighting chance. The pilots, now fighting against the clock, were faced with a daunting task. They had to keep the plane airborne, they had to keep their passengers safe, and they had to find a place to land. And they had to do all this without engines, without full power, and without any nearby airports. With no engines, no nearby airports, and 69 lives on the line, the pilots had to make a decision. A decision that would test not just their skills and training, but their courage and resolve. In the face of adversity, the pilots devised an audacious plan. The pilots, Captain Bob Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintal, found themselves in an unprecedented situation. They were in a Boeing 767, a behemoth of the skies with no fuel at all. An impossible scenario, one might think, but these men were not ordinary. They were trained, experienced, and above all, they were pilots. They had a decision to make and make it fast. They had to find a safe place to land, and they had to do it without any engine power. In their minds, they started to go over a mental list of possible landing sites. The nearest airport was too far away. They had to think out of the box, they had to think fast. And then it came to them, the Gimli Industrial Park Airport. Yes, it was a decommissioned airfield, no longer used for commercial flights, but it was within gliding distance and had a long enough runway to accommodate their aircraft. It was a risky choice, but it was the best they had. Now the challenge was to execute this plan. Remember, they were in a passenger airplane, not a glider. But Captain Pearson had an ace up his sleeve. He was an experienced glider pilot. He knew how to manipulate the controls, how to use the wind, how to descend at just the right angle. But could he do it with a Boeing 767? First Officer Quintal quickly calculated the glide ratio. They had just one shot at this. They had to get it right. It was a nail-biting moment, but they kept their cool. They adjusted their flight path, they controlled their descent rate, they managed their speed. They were doing something no one had ever done before, but they did it. They glided their plane towards the Gimli Industrial Park Airport. Using skill, training, and sheer determination, they turned their passenger airplane into a giant glider, a feat that would go down in aviation history. Their destination, a decommissioned airfield. Their mission, to save every life on board. The moment of truth arrived, and with it, a miracle. As our tale unfolds, we find ourselves on the edge of our seats as the pilots of Air Canada Flight 143 faced the ultimate test of their skills. The location was Gimli, a small airstrip in the heartland of Canada, an unlikely setting for one of aviation's most heart-stopping moments. The pilots, with nerves of steel and instinct taking over, guided the powerless Boeing 767 onto the runway. The plane, now referred to as the Gimli glider, was a silent spectre in the sky, its engines eerily quiet as it descended. With the precision of a surgeon and the calm of a monk, the pilots touched down on the narrow strip of asphalt. But the drama wasn't over. The plane was moving too fast, and the end of the runway was rapidly approaching. The pilots pulled every lever, turned every knob, and prayed every prayer they knew. In a last-ditch effort, they applied the plane's emergency brakes, and miraculously the plane stopped, just in time. The passengers, who had been bracing for the worst, were stunned into silence. Then, as the realization dawned that they were safe, the cabin erupted into cheers. The immediate evacuation that followed was orderly and swift, a testament to the crew's professionalism and the passengers' resilience. Despite the harrowing ordeal, the injuries were minor. Some passengers sustained minor bumps and bruises during the evacuation, but there were zero fatalities. The Gimli glider had lived up to its name, gliding to safety and sparing the lives of all those on board. The successful landing at Gimli is a testament to the skill and courage of the pilots and the crew. They turned what could have been a disastrous situation into a miraculous story of survival. Against all odds, Flight 143 had landed. The Gimli glider, as it came to be known, was a symbol of triumph over adversity. The story of the Gimli glider did not end with the landing. The aftermath brought about a wave of scrutiny, leading to an intensive investigation. This deep dive into the events of that fateful day unveiled a simple yet critical error, a miscalculation in the fuel load. This discovery sparked a revolution in flight procedures. From this, the aviation industry learned the importance of meticulousness in every aspect of flight preparation. Airlines worldwide adopted more stringent protocols, reinforcing the need for precision and double-checking. But beyond the procedural changes, the Gimli glider incident shed light on the power of training and human resilience in the face of adversity. The crew's composed response underscores the value of thorough training and the significance of a calm demeanor in crisis management. The Gimli glider will forever serve as a reminder of the importance of precision, training, and the indomitable human spirit.